Story title: Brew of Shadows, Chapter 1, Unseen Beginnings. The reverberating sound of clattering cups and the low hum of conversations filled the air of San Francisco's Darling Bean Cafe, a bustling enclave of caffeinated rituals nestled within the city's bohemian heart. Melissa Watford, still in the grip of half-dreams and the morning's chill, clutched her usual mug of dark roast. She was a remarkably lively yet composed woman, a journalist with eyes that could unsettle any potential interviewee. The cafe was an urban tapestry, threads of eclectic personalities interwoven against a backdrop of soothing music and the hiss of espresso machines. Each patron was lost in their world, oblivious to the dark precedent about to unfold. Melissa watched with mild frustration as her fiancé Tom discussed his latest project with fervor. It was a scene she'd often envisioned as her own life narrative, two people threading dreams around each other, binding them tightly with shared experiences. But the cinematic serenity shattered when a scream, raw and jarring, cut through the cafe's placid atmosphere. Tom, always unsuspecting in his earnestness, had slumped onto the table without warning, his eyes wide with unprocessed bewilderment. A crescendo of chaos erupted as staff and patrons surged forward, unrealized horror reflected in their expressions. The paramedics arrived, their efficiency doing little to shield those present from the stark truth. Tom was the first confirmed victim of what would soon be known as the Phantom Brewer's reign of terror. Melissa was left with an indelible imprint of shock in her heart, each beat a reminder of that moment's daunting clarity. Alerted to the tragedy, Detective Nolan stood amidst the pandemonium long enough to piece together the tragedy's nascent form. He was a man burdened with the responsibility of calm, his gaze sweeping like searching crescents around the room, identifying outlines of fear and grief. The spectacle of Tom's demise quickly became a catalyst for apprehension. In the melee, Nolan noted a single untouched espresso cup as if someone had been there moments before, submerged within the human swarm and then evaporated into mystery. He suspected this anomaly would evolve into a specter haunting his thoughts in nights to come. Chapter 2: Shadows of Alabaster. From San Francisco's fog-drenched streets, our mysterious phantom brewer receded into shadow, ever a silhouette against bustling metropolises and quiet towns alike. Driven by motives opaque yet insidious, his presence fluttered like a wisp through cities born of alabaster dreams, marking places with death's malaise and coffee's bitter smell. Melissa, spiraling within her own maelstrom, swung between the pendulums of grief and vengeful longing. With Tom's absence, the muted spectrum of her life grew into a kaleidoscope's worth of determination. No longer confined to reporting the world's happenings, her prey became that specter, leaving literal dark stains upon the sacred morning custom. Story as days turned to weeks, the pulse of a nation beat unevenly. The coffee shops, once vibrant epicenters of conversation and laughter, grew hushed under the cloak of fear. The missing warmth left an invisible void pulling at the seams of society. Outcry burgeoned, tinged with uncertainty and dwelling in whispered echoes of suspicion permeating every savory sip taken. Detective Nolan traced the disappearing figure's peregrinations, threading himself between leads both substantial and illusorily tenuous. The killer's methodology was a constant unseen pressure on the detective's psyche, a gnawing presence compelling in its morbid cleverness. Meanwhile, Nolan's public persona faltered under the glare of growing scrutiny. In countless cafes, unassuming individuals continued to serve, masked beneath veils of anxiety, conscious each transaction could precede another hollow visage staring into eternity. The economy convulsed under the tension, its reliant spinal cord a paradox of dependency and distrust. Melissa's tenacity morphed from her bygone tangible optimism into a force of blazing will. Setting her sights on tracking patterns hidden beneath this spectral riddle, she methodically unraveled stories of survival from the ashes of each attack, seeking connections invisible to the casual eye but conspicuous under her obsessive lens. Anchored amidst this atmospheric dread was the looming question of motive, an aspect shroud-like in its cover, only revealing glimpses through the nebulous thicket of our phantom's dark past. Chapter 3: Caffeine and Calcination. The ghostly silhouette danced across another muraled cityscape. This time, beneath the languorous drawl of blues and jazz in New Orleans, the enigmatic figure carried cyanide's death kiss. A smattering of left-behind beans trailed his journey beneath ambers and violets of the twilight sky, his movements orchestrating chaos from coffee to coffin. Melissa Watford's resolve hardened further, melding her grief into a cutting edge of determination. She had arrived in New Orleans, her feet feeling like lead as they touched down in a city alive with music and vibrant life. But amidst the animated, melodic nights and the intoxicating aroma of beignets mixing with the rich scent of coffee, a sinister presence lingered. She sought solace in her camera lens, capturing moments of a city bustling on the edge of fear. Each frame told its own story, but the photos taken inside the coffee shops were starkly devoid of the life happening outside their walls, a somber testament to the phantom brewer's influence. Detective Nolan had arrived in New Orleans as well, following the trail of terror. Despite the city's festive veneer, the tension was palpable, and this energized him. He met with local law enforcement, their battered spirits barely veiled under bruised egos as they grappled with this unprecedented threat roiling in their streets. During these first days in the city, Melissa and Nolan would cross paths, strangers, yet inexplicably bound by a shared quest. It was in the French Quarter, amidst tourists clumsily enamored by the city's mystique, where Melissa caught sight of him in a narrowing alley, his eyes scanning the crowd with an intensity mirrored by her own determination. "Story Detective Nolan," she interrupted his survey, voice firm and brimming with urgency. "I was at Darling Bean in San Francisco. The first attack." Nolan turned, recognizing Melissa from photographs preserved in reports. Her reputation preceded her, a tenacious journalist with a trail of incisive stories. "Melissa Watford," he acknowledged, a note of respect tempering his tone. "I'm sorry about your loss." The recognition did little to thaw the ice in her heart, but it was a start. "I have leads," she cut to the chase, determination radiating from her words. "Stories from survivors, patterns of behavior. We're both fighting this, but maybe together we could stop him." He hesitated. The burden of responsibility he'd carried this far suddenly felt lighter at the prospect of a shared load. Yet the law's strictures were an insistent whisper in his mind. "It's too dangerous," he warned, more reflex than conviction. "Dangerous is doing nothing," Melissa countered, her voice unyielding. Her eyes held a steadfast promise of determination, and Nolan saw something in them impossible to dismiss. Reluctantly, Nolan agreed to collaborate. An unlikely partnership formed from necessity and a shared drive for justice. They began piecing together the shattered stories, unraveling clues too subtle for average perception, but vivid to their investigative eyes. Chapter 4: Haunting Exhalations. As they delved deeper into the heart of New Orleans, Melissa and Nolan discovered the Phantom Brewer's twisted symphony of ruin was far more sophisticated, a riddle encoded within urban legends and itinerant whispers. Cafes with peculiar histories, marred by enigmatic incidents, pointed towards a methodical genius behind perceived madness. The enemy they pursued was not simply a killer, but a methodical architect weaving intents beneath layers of misdirection. While grappling with the aftermath of Tom's death, Melissa came across a peculiar thread, accounts of mysterious disappearances linked to a disgraced coffee brewing company. Each thread in this intricate tapestry pointed towards a personal vendetta, a grudge manifested as calculated carnage. As dusk unfurled its shroud over vibrant rooftops and shadowed alleyways, Melissa and Nolan scoured historical connections, decrypting patterns beneath benign surfaces. Their courses converged in hidden corners, fortified by clandestine trust and driven by an overwhelming need for closure. In cafes built anew upon old misfortune, legendary tales surfaced. Baristas whispered that the unseen perpetrator's intentions were born of betrayal, a justice twisted beyond recognizably human contours. The whispered tales teased fragments of a forgotten name, an origin lost amidst the scent of roasting beans and tragic legacies. One night under the moon's watchful eye, Melissa found herself face to face with a reluctant informant at a cafe marked by the Phantom Brewer's touch. The barista, initially guarded, thawed under her relentless inquiries. "I heard he had a deal go sour once," the barkeep confessed, glancing over his shoulder as if mere mention would conjure the very devil. "Lost everything, even his mind, some say, all over bad coffee." Story. The revelation sat heavy within Melissa's heart, confirming her suspicion that beneath the enigmatic acts shone an all-too-human frailty. The tale told of a man whose brilliance brimmed with potential, but was extinguished by brewing disputes and a misplaced, cyanide-laden vengeance. Meanwhile, Nolan had unearthed shards of this origin, connecting threads to corporate sabotage and commercial betrayals that wrapped around the killer's backstory like a shroud. Each clue dug deeper into the psyche of their shadowy adversary, revealing a mosaic of simmering rage and a dark genius, fueled by betrayal and personal vendetta. Chapter 5. Strings of Fate. It was an overcast day when Melissa and Nolan stumbled upon the baleful remnants of a failed coffee empire dismantled by scandal, the now-defunct Vermilion Brews. This discovery heralded a moment of clarity amidst the fog of chaos. Interviews with former employees unearthed stories of a visionary owner whose passion for crafting the perfect cup was eclipsed by the collapse of his life's work, his psyche teetering from acolyte of caffeine to architect of chaos. Each story held a shard of truth wrapped in legend, a narrative made myth over time. The name they repeatedly encountered was Mason Halliday, a once renowned barista prodigy known for his unorthodox methods and groundbreaking flavors. Halliday's fall from grace began after allegations of embezzlement and compromised product quality surfaced, a scandal that ravaged his reputation and shredded trust in the very fabric he had woven so meticulously. In the shadows of New Orleans, Melissa found herself piecing Mason's history together, driven by an empathy she didn't expect for someone who had taken everything from her. She delved into articles which sculpted Mason as both ambitious and compassionate, with a peculiar gift for blending flavors that spoke soul to his patrons. But embellished failures turned his world acrimonious, driving him into the depths of reclusion. Meanwhile, Nolan's investigation pulled him further into the complex tapestry of betrayal. He scrutinized financial records, drawing connections between ruined suppliers and soured business partners, gradually weaving the Phantom Brewer's backstory into stark relief. Inferable from Halliday's descent was a psyche drowned in bitterness, one that had festered into lethal ideation. Their alliance grew stronger, their combined revelations reshaping Melissa's narrative from that of a grieving fiancé to a truth-seeker stepping across moral dimensions she once refrained from touching. Nolan, ever pragmatic, found himself admiring her vigor, knowing she walked a razor's edge between hunting their prey and being consumed by her own wild quest. Chapter 6. A Tapestry of Shadows. In the heart of New Orleans, Melissa and Nolan recognized a meiosis of mansion and ruin, where fate had once sowed Mason Halliday's promising enterprise, now dormant, its derelict facade a sepulchre of dreams unmade. They embarked on a perilous exploration of its secrets, immersing themselves within the forsaken edifice to find clues lingering amidst dust-lined galleries. Story, unexpected artifacts of Halliday's life lingered in the stillness. Innovations in brewing techniques noted on yellowing paper, the once aromatic marvels long since dulled, instruments once touched by masterful hands now grim with neglect. Among these remnants lay a ledger, absent of usual commerce, but instead inscribed with musings and plans of retributive chaos. The walls whispered stories of desperation and twisted justice, a narrative of a genius broken, now resurrected into a manifestation of demise. Symbolic messages in Mason's notes etched a timeline and intent among cities chosen for their allure, yet linked by threads only he knew. Each city, a painting framed by chaos, marked by his broken aspirations. Emerging from this sight, Melissa cradled an infernal understanding. Not only was this phantom inspired by vendetta, but his artistry reflected silent pleas, a symphony of lament and broken essence manifested through coffee's aromatic bite lines. For every city struck, a fragment of Halliday's soul scattered beneath its vibrant veneer. In collaboration, Nolan and Melissa compiled these newfound insights into a coherent puzzle, its pieces fraught with despair and a burgeoning, urgent need to prevent the next tragedy. All roads led towards the Phantom Brewer's sinister crescendo yet to transpire, in cities where they had once dwelled unafraid. Chapter 7. The Vendetta's Edge. The discovery of Halliday's manifesto propelled them into a frantic chase, urgency breathing life into their every move. Now it was Savannah that lay in peril. its antebellum charm and cobblestone streets poised unwittingly on the brink as the phantom inevitably drew closer. Amidst the Spanish moss-draped oaks and ghost-laden pathways of Savannah, Melissa and Nolan confronted the grim specter of Halliday's lapsed sanity. Their steps echoed through the storied city, weaving through alleyways haunted by both history and impending dread. Melissa's search found her face-to-face with coffee aficionados and baristas alike, their passion still flickering beneath the specter of potential poisoning. Stories from cafes past lingered, tales of mysterious patrons and unsettling occurrences, each another thread she'd unknowingly tied into her tapestry. With each revelation, the need to strike up strength within communities grew. An inspired idea bloomed in Melissa's mind, to harness collective vigilance, unifying those threatened under a singular purpose, to reclaim their ritual from the shadows threatening to suffocate it. With the support of local proprietors, she fostered a sense of community, urging them to be watchful, to communicate, to ensure no cup was left unattended. By creating a network of trust, each barista became a sentinel, and every patron a watchman. Nolan, on the other hand, doubled his efforts with law enforcement, refocusing investigations based on the insights gleaned from Halliday's past. He scrutinized each connection and dissected the network of betrayal and ruin surrounding Vermilion Brews. The list of known associates narrowed, helping to identify potential targets for Halliday's vendetta. As night descended upon Savannah, threads from both Melissa's collective and Nolan's official endeavor wove together, forming an intricate mesh designed to ensnare their adversary. The city became an unwitting stage prepared for the final unraveling of Halliday's dark magnum opus. Chapter 8: Echoes in the Cafe. The awaited confrontation bubbled beneath Savannah's humid atmosphere, as a chosen cafe, the Lantern's Glow, teetered at the brink, rumored to be the next canvas for the Phantom Brewer's twisted work. Signs pointed to this locale, a place steeped in history, known for its illustrious brews and equally storied hauntings. The Lantern's Glow pulsed with unease, patrons aware of their part in an unseen drama unfolding around them. Beneath the cafe's flickering lights, Melissa and Nolan stationed themselves, poised to intercept fate on its tortuous path. The tense anticipation was visceral, a silence echoing through the clattering of cups and staccato of espresso shots. Eyes darted, scanning faces, each new patron scrutinized. Who among them could be the architect of such chaos? Inevitably, as the hour drew late, an unusual presence surfaced, subtle in demeanor, yet oddly jarring. A man sat in the corner, wearing a tailored vest and bearing a conspicuous air of meticulous intent. The cloying, heavy scent of almonds seemed to emanate and diffuse across the room. Nolan's instincts sharpened. Melissa, heart-pounding, observed minutely from her position, waiting for a signal. The anticipation, once electric, thinned, a hushed reverence taking its place as the man gingerly stirred his brew. And then it happened. A slight movement, a pill slipping from an unseen hand towards a cup left unattended. Before realization could ripple, Nolan erupted from his seat, a commanding presence halting the man's motion as if time itself stalled. The silence that followed was deafening, an arrested breath hanging suspended in the room. The community, galvanized by Melissa's influence, stood as one, resolute against the figure who had so long terrorized them. United, they rose, apprehending their fears in flesh and blood with Melissa, the witness to Tom's last breath, almost astonished by the solidarity born from her appeal. Chapter 9: The Heart of Darkness. The man was indeed Mason Halliday, now unmasked, his calculated demeanor dissolving beneath the weight of realization. As authorities moved to secure him, Nolan mirrored a bittersweet triumph reflected in Melissa's eyes, theirs allies forever forged in justice and grief. Confronted, Halliday's countenance twisted from venom to something that almost whispered vulnerability. Not entirely madness, but unfathomable loss etched deeply into the planes of his face. "Why?" Melissa demanded, her voice trembling at the embers of rage previously honed to steel. A solemn response broke from Halliday, confessions whispered siren-like across devastated dreams. His vendetta was a requiem, an ode to ruin woven from betrayal, built upon once unassailable trust in abandoned ambition. What they saw in him was not solely a man broken by external forces, but one who willingly shattered himself. Detective Nolan observed with somber comprehension, recognizing the wounds and the jagged justice Halliday sought to spin into wicked cycles. But no vendetta, regardless its vehemence, could justify the horrors unleashed. In that silent exchange, Melissa recognized the arc her journey had taken. From desolation to resolution, her vendetta met and intently salved by the unity she drew amongst the people willing to rise. Her gaze softened, not in forgiveness, but in pragmatic acceptance of closure. Chapter 10: A New Dawn. With Halliday apprehended, a nation exhaled. The tendrils of fear that had snaked into every corner gradually retraced, reknitting bonds of trust amongst communities once fractured. The ritual of coffee resumed, now guarded by a collective vigilance forged from scars. Melissa, forever altered, embraced her blended path anew. She found peace not in vengeance fulfilled, but within stories woven from resilience, echoing Tom's sincere vivacity he shared and the duty his demise imposed on her. Her journalistic pursuit shifted focus, shining light on the power of communities fighting unseen battles, standing united in the face of adversity. Detective Nolan, too, had emerged from the shadows cast by the Phantom Brewer, his faith restored in the justice system's capacity to protect and serve. He remained steadfast in his resolve, now more attuned to the human elements that form the fabric of crime and justice. In the weeks that followed, coffee houses across the nation experienced a renaissance of camaraderie. Patrons and baristas engaged in deeper connections, and trust grew like tendrils once cut by fear. The smell of coffee returned to its sanctuary status, its preparation now an act of shared guardianship, less taken for granted, more cherished than before. As Melissa sipped her morning brew, the steam rising to meet a new dawn, the world felt different. Each sip was a reminder of what had been lost and what had been found. In the end, the brew of shadows had given way to a brew of light, born from a collective resilience and the indomitable spirit of those who chose to rise together. The cafes once haunted now became beacons of hope, the rhythm of espresso machines blending with the heartbeat of their patrons, unified. And as Melissa looked out the window, watching the world awaken with each passing moment, she knew that while shadows may linger, the strength of the collective light would always illuminate the path forward. In the end, her journey through the darkness had revealed a deeper truth, that within each cup of coffee, brewed with care and consumed in trust, lay a small, yet mighty symbol of human connection, casting warmth upon the shadows of solitude. Through the chaos and fear, Melissa discovered not only justice for Tom, but a new purpose, one brewed from resilience, unity, and the innate human desire to find light, even in the darkest of times.